So the last workshop, I think we talked about census records. In this workshop, we're going to talk about county records. And some county records, they kind of straddle the fence of whether they county records or they state records. At some point, they county records, then another time they state records. And then sometimes they're both, they continue to be county and state records, kind of like a marriage record. You can find them at the state and you can find them at the county. So welcome today, this August 12th, 2023, to the William Winter Building, named after former Governor William Winter. And so let's kind of get into it. If you have questions, just write them down, and then we'll go back and just tell me what slide it was, okay? All right. I'm going to be moving back and forth, so don't mind me. I'm Joyce Dixon-Lawson. I've been worked at Archives and History since January of 1988. Then I retired at the end of 2020, stayed out a couple months, and decided this retirement thing is just not for me. So I had to find some more work to do. The first thing I like to tell anybody, no matter what kind of workshop I'm doing, genealogy is personal. It is personal to the fact that some people are not going to want to help you. Some of those family members are not going to want to help you. Because this is their personal story, and sometimes they feel like that you're intruding in their personal story. So when that happens, don't let that dissuade you any. Just ask the next person, okay? And then later on, once they start talking about it, I'm like, well, you know, I didn't know she wanted to know that. So I'm gonna let me call and let's talk about this some more. It's always important to me when you start talking about genealogy is to know that every state was not a slaveholding state. So you need a little history lesson first. So on this map, you can see that we have the free states that are in blue. You have the slave states that are in pink. And then you have the territory open to counted places that are open to slavery. So you need to know where you are when you say, my ancestors are from here. Well, did they even have slaves here, right? So you're spinning your wheels, and you should be going down a different route. But we see Mississippi right there in the pink. And on the other side here, it tells you the dates they succeeded from the Union. So a lot of times we hear people say, well, the Emancipation Proclamation freed all the slaves. There's a caveat there. It only freed those slaves as slavehold in the states that succeeded from the Union. Now, if you were in one of those territories there and you didn't succeed from the Union, that Emancipation Proclamation didn't affect you, right? It's also important to know when your county was formed. Is your county the parent county? Are you looking for your relatives in Alcorn County, and you can't find them well, I can't find any records in Alcorn County. Maybe it's because Alcorn County wasn't formed in 1870. Or you're looking for Humphreys County, and it was formed after 1900. So you need to look for the parent county. You need to be looking over in Yazoo County and Holmes County, those counties, because you're not going to find them in Humphreys County Courthouse, because the courthouse was formed after 1900. When we leave out this room today, you have the opportunity to go over to the search room. And one of the first screens you're going to see is this screen right here. Let me see, I think there's a point on here. Let me check and see. I guess not. But under quick searches, you're going to see county records on microfilm when you go to the search room. So you're going to go to your county, and then it's going to give you the names of the records. Then you click on it, it's going to give you a detail of what records we have, okay? You can also do some of this online, because this catalog is online. So what record are we going to search for today? So I just narrowed it down to will records, which include your probate, your estate, and the final records, your marriage records, and your deed records. Because we're looking for former enslaved people before they were free. So in that essence, that means we're looking for people that are listed as property. Because that's what a enslaved person is, their property. And we won't look for them as property. Sometimes it's hard to get to this step, that you look for your ancestors' property, but when we want to find something, we have to push back the emotional part of it and just get down to what it is. As I usually say, just the facts. Will records, probate, estate, and the final records. And you're going to see them listed. Sometimes you find a will record, and it have the estate record hooked onto it. It had the probate record. It had the final records. And then you may go to another county, and it's going to have all listed separate. You have to go to the will records. Then you go to the probate records. Then you go to the estate records. And maybe they got some final records. You don't know till you get to that county and start searching. And my thing is, when you're doing genealogy of any kind of research, you turn over every stone that you see. You may go to the state records, they may just have from 1 year, but you don't know that because you haven't clicked on it, right? Check that record. One of my favorite records, and because this has such a story to it, is the Captain Isaac Ross. This will record not only tells me about Isaac Ross, but it tells me where he's from. He's from North Carolina. He died in 1836 in Jefferson County. I know that the Jefferson County Courthouse has some amazing records because there has not been a huge courthouse fire there. Now those counties with the courthouse fire, they just hurt my heart, but Jefferson County is not one of those. This is generally what an official record looks like. This is the handwritten will record, but I'm going to take you to a transcribed record because you can't read this, and I can only read it with my magnifying glass. But I just wanted you to know, when you see this, sometimes you're not going to get a transcribed record, and you have to pull out that magnifying glass and just really get down to it, taking it one word at a time. So I really wanted to do was first in I checked if someone got a will record. I want to check into 1840 and 1850 and see if they even had any property. So they didn't have any property. They used my really looking for a will record for enslaved people because they didn't have any property, right? Not everyone had property. Not everyone owned slaves. Not everyone owned land. So this is one of the transcribed property of Isaac Ross. If you notice, this estate his estate was inventoried, and these are some of the people that were listed in his records. There were some that had put them in different lots. And then you can see the value of them because of the estate. When somebody does an inventory, they're going to say, how much is this worth? How much is that worth? You know? So they're doing the same thing with the slaves. So if you find look for your ancestry, that's what you're going to do. You're going to look at the surname and see if you can trace that back to a slave owner. And hopefully he has a detailed list of his property. Or maybe he had a lot of property and someone said, well, I want this and I want that. He didn't leave a will. What if he didn't leave a will? His estate, see, it has to be probated. Or there's going to be a lot of family members being upset because they're going to fight over the property. So the first thing you have to do is go to the probate court. Then the probate court said, we need this estate inventory to see what he has. That way we can find out how to divide it up. This is still part of the same estate. And you see some people worth a lot more than others, and I think that's because of their age and their gender. And they may have some other physical, something physical going on with them to make their property value less. But we don't care about that. We just want to find their name and then find them later on, right? Whoops. So one of the things I like to do is when I'm looking for the enslaved planner, I like to see the property. Now this plantation house was burned, and this was the rebuilt part. I'm not seeing the actual plantation house, but this is close I can get to it. And also the map gives me a location. Because a lot of times you can take a map. If I know where they are, then I can take the map and I'll do a circumference around the plantation and see how far the people spread it out. Because sometimes they don't go very far. Sometimes they're still living on that same land, and they may be renting, they may be sharecropping from the former slave owner. And sometimes you see they change their names. They may have changed their last name, but majority of the time, their first name is going to stay the same. So I take a census record like 1870, and I'm like, okay, so I know that John and Sally and William all on this plantation. I saw them in the will record, okay? So they were at this age because the will record told me how old they were, right? So I'm gonna add that up to 1870, see how old they would have been. And then I'm just gonna take the actual census itself and read it, not the index. I'm gonna take the actual census record and start to read it page by page and see if I find some of those same names. So this is Adams County, the first county formed in Mississippi. So this John McNeil, and his record was dated 1826. And these are actually really fascinating records when you actually read the handwritten will records. I like a transcribed record, but a transcribed record sometimes will miss parts that if you don't go to the actual record itself, you're gonna miss it. Because I may see a T where someone else sees an L. And then you look over like, that's not the person I'm looking for. Then you go back to the original record and like, okay, the transcriber missed something. So not only is he going to list his actual slaves here, but he's going to list all other property. And you'll be amazed how many pots and pans and watches and pianos and all this kind of stuff, because that's property. Things that we don't really think about now, how much they were actually valued in this time period. So I just wrote this one down. This was the probate record of Marshall County, sale of slaves of the estate of Manso Hall in 1846. And in this record, it actually tells who bought the slaves. Now, a lot of times you don't find that record. And like I said before, if you don't go to the record, you won't actually know. Once I see that name, I'm looking for that name everywhere I can find it at. And you see, it was actually probated in 1846, but the date when the inventory was done was 1848, so there's a 2-year gap. So there may be some other slaves that was on that record that passed away by this time period. And it looks like they're keeping these slaves right here in the family. And that's also important to know too. So we talk about will records and probate, and this is just a blocker right here. It just tells me to stop and talk about these will records and everything. This is the library in Houston, Mississippi. When we talk about the will records and the probate, not every will record or probate record is going to tell you the names of their slaves or of their property. Sometimes you'll get a will record and it's just going to say, I bequeath all my property to my son John. Then even if you get a transcribed record, it may say slaves listed but not mentioned. Okay? So you're not all the time, you're just not going to find that great record I was just showing you. So in that case, you're going to have to try to find another way to locate that ancestor. And then I would suggest I was using the surname of the former enslaved person, even though we do know that a lot of times people change their names. And they change their name for a variety of reasons. One reason is that they didn't want to be associated with that plantation anymore. Sometimes they change the name because they have this feeling that maybe this freedom thing is temporary. And once I'm out of sight, I don't want you to try to find me again. I'm gonna change my whole name. I'm gonna move to another county. I may move to another state. Well, we don't know how long this freedom is going to last. Because this is something new to us, right? So if I'm thinking, this may be temporary. I may move to California somewhere. But I'm going to get away from this plantation, because I'm not. Once I taste taste of freedom, I don't want to be enslaved anymore, right? Now, marriage records are funny records. You can find marriage records in the county, and you can find marriage records at the Department of Vital Records. Now, the Department of Vital Records wasn't formed until November 1912, and you notice that because that's when birth and death records started being kept. However, Vital Records did not start keeping marriage records. If you go to their website, it'll tell you marriage records are available January the 1st, 1926 to June 30th, 1938, and from January 1st, 1942 to the present. Although it was required by law that marriage records be reported to the Department of Health, not every marriage record was reported. So you may find a marriage record in the county, and you go to Vital Records, it's not there. Because a lot of times people didn't know that you had to report it to the Department of Health. I found plenty of marriage records in the county records, but if you go to the Department of Health, they're not there. It's just the same as you find sometimes, okay, we know that you're supposed to keep birth records from November 1912 to 1943, right? Well, my father was born in 1942. He had no birth record. He was trying to get his Social Security, and there was no birth record on file for him. So we had to get a supplemental birth record for him. The midwife was there. He was born at home. But those records somehow did not get to the Department of Health. And that's really very common, that you're going to see that. Years ago, when they first started doing Social Security, they had a big crackdown on elderly people because they didn't have birth records. So they had to come to the Department of Archives and History and get a copy of the census record that showed when they were actually born. So it didn't give actual date, but it said, okay, 1930, this person was 50 years old. So that narrows it down, says, okay, I'm old enough to be drawing Social Security, right? So a lot of times they even went to the Department of Health, they got this long sheet of paper, and it tells them what all you need for us to make you a birth record. Okay, so a lot of times you go to the Department of Health and you say, I know I have a birth record. Because with my grandmother, we brought her down here and we did a birth record. They said, no, it was before 1912. But you have to tell them, look for prior births. Because the person at the desk doesn't always know that. So you go to that different section of records called prior births, and then you're going to see a birth record. So this happened with a patron, and she called, and she said, I can't get this birth record. This is the birth certificate number. And I called Vital Records, and they said it's not on file. So I said, hold on just a second, let me call them. And so I called them, and I said, did you look under prior births? And they said, what are those? I said, those are records that were made later. So I said, here's the certificate number. And she pulled it right up. She said, but no one ever told her that. So, if you don't know, what? You don't know. So you just have to keep pushing. If you know something, keep pushing for it. One of my favorite things is, what county did my ancestors get married in? Now, I'm from Calhoun County. And the courthouse burned in 1922 or 24, one or the other. I'm getting a little older and I can't remember the exact date. So I always thought that since they lived in Calhoun County, they got married in Calhoun County. I couldn't find the record. Like, okay, so all records are burned in Calhoun County and I'm not going to be able to find them? So you ask yourself these questions. Which courthouse is closer to my ancestor? Did they have transportation? Which county is closer to the home of the bride's family? Because a lot of times, parents do not want their young ladies going off to get married in some other county without them knowing that you married my daughter. You just get her off somewhere and decide, we're just going to live together. Oh, no, sir. You're going to marry her right here where I can see you. Okay, come on. I'm having one of those days when the machine doesn't like me. Okay, so you don't want to work? Okay, let's see. Let me see if I can use the arrow. Look at the arrow work. Okay, take IT people. Come to my rescue.
Let's see, the clicker not working anymore.
Yeah.
This is so odd. Well, I guess what I can do is move it for you and you just
Okay.
let me know
Okay.
when you want me to move it.
Okay, let's go to the next slide.
Let's see if that will work. Okay. Okay.
Okay, so this is a marriage record for Albert Dampier and his wife, Likey Newsom. This is in Lawrence County or Simpson County? Whichever, okay, it's Lawrence County. And I always ask them if it's Lawrence or Simpson County because those counties are right there together. And Mr. Dampier lived in Lawrence County. But Miss Newsom, she lived in Simpson County. So you always have to look at both, say, okay, the room is from this area, the bride from this area, which courthouse did they get married in? Now, the funny thing is that their daughter, their great-granddaughter, Adosha Dampier, her daughter was born in New Hebron, up in Lawrence County, and her husband was born in Simpson County, but they came all the way to Jackson to get married. They kind of eloped. So you would think, okay, they in Lawrence or Simpson County, right? But no, they kind of skedaddled down to Jackson. Then they told their parents, oh, we got married. You have to look for that also. So next slide, please. Sometimes you won't have an actual marriage record. Sometimes you would give just a little sheet of paper and say, I'm giving permission for my daughter to marry this person. A lot of times in the courthouses, they just put that little slip of paper in the book, and over the years, those slips of paper get lost. Okay? So if you don't see, well, they weren't old enough to get married, they needed permission, but sometimes that permission slip was lost in the transfer. Okay. Now let's get back to my relatives over here in Vardaman, up in Calhoun County. And I did not think about this too. You know, we always say, do this, do that. But your parents always say, practice what you preach. Well, I wasn't practicing what I was preaching. So how can I find all these relatives that's supposed to be in Calhoun County? I'm like, that courthouse family, what happened to them? And so I was driving in Calhoun County. I was in Vardaman, which is Calhoun County. And I was going to Houston. And guess what? It's a straight shot. But Pittsburgh is not a straight shot. Okay, so even on Highway 8 here, I'm in Vardaman, in Calhoun City. Yeah, but the courthouse over in Pittsburgh, it's up there, straight up. You see that? The next slide, please.
And I'm from Webster County.
And now look.
Georgia County.
Oh, so you close by. Right. Now, look where Houston is, with that red point right there. You see Vardaman? Isn't that a straight shot? Now, why didn't I think to go to Houston County Courthouse? I'm driving all around the courthouse, and it dawns on me, did you check Houston? Not only did I find stuff I wanted, I found some stuff I didn't know, and some stuff that my parents didn't want me to find. Because we actually double related. My mom said, stop it right there. You're finding too much. Because my relatives are supposed to be over in Clay County, were actually over in Chickasaw County, and those in Calhoun County, over in Chickasaw County. What'd they tell you? Mm-hmm. That's why she told me that you need to just stop right there. But hey, it is what it is, right? It's genealogy. You cannot change it. You cannot change it. It is history. It is what it is. It's personal. She said, that's my personal business. I'm like, oh, I'm into it now, lady. I'm into it now. So follow your instincts. Go to the closest courthouse. And then sometimes you have to double check because see, Chickasaw County has 2 courthouses. They have one in Houston and another in Oklahoma. But, you know, they didn't live close to Oklahoma. So I went to one in Houston. And then when I looked for my stepfather, I went to Oklahoma because he lived closer to Oklahoma. And I found his relatives in that courthouse because they lived in Hucker, which is close to Oklahoma. It's just a circle. Okay, let's go to the next one. Because I think we're going to get out of marriage track because this is the holding spot. I like this picture because it reminds me of where I came from. I lived in plenty of dog trot houses. And we didn't know they were called dog trot houses then. We just thought they were 2 houses put together. And what it is, it's 2 pins with a top. And sometimes they both have 2 chimneys, and sometimes they have 1. All right. And there's a lot of cotton out there.
Now, what did you say they were called?
They're called dog trot. Right. See that open space right there in between the 2 houses? Yeah, not only dogs now, but deer and everything else walk through them. Yes. I'm the living witness, so we lived in one, and I told Daddy, there's a deer on the porch. He said, well, let me get my shotgun. So needless to say, that deer was next time I saw him, he was in the smokehouse. Okay. So let's go to the next one. Deed records. Deed records are not just land. Deed records are to me in genealogy, it's one of the overlooked records that you can look at. Because you think of deed, I'm thinking of my property, of my land. But a slave is property. And you want a deed to your property, right? And sometimes these deeds are very informative. Sometimes you look at the index and it just say, I, John Smith, sell my slave, Joyce, to William Johnson. Okay, that's it. And then you may come to another deed and it says, you got a whole selection of slaves. And not only does it list all the slaves by name, it gives me a physical description of them. So I can almost visualize this whole family, right? Let me get the next slide, please. This is a deed record from Monroe County. So look at what it says. The first thing that threw me off, it says, Medlong, free person of color. So why am I having a deed record to this free person of color? I'm gonna have to search that. Many times I looked at this deed record, it has not hit me like it did just the other day. But it said, description of her family dated the 25th of September, 1819. So it's up there in Monroe County, which is the oldest county in the northeast part of the state. It says, Medlong, a mulatto woman, so I already know that she's probably mixed race. Age 50 to 55 years old, short and light colored. Kitty, daughter of Medlong, age 28, light complexion, light eyes. William, son of Medlong, age 23, light complexion, light eyes, about 5 feet 9 inches. Elizabeth, daughter of Medlong, age 13, light complexion, black eyes, about 3 feet 2 inches tall. Abel, son of Medlong, age 17, light complexion. Daniel, son of Kitty, age 4.5 years, brown eyes, blue eyes. So y'all notice we're going from light eyes, then we got black eyes, now we got what? Blue eyes. Elsa, granddaughter of Medlong, age 6 years old, brown hair, black eyes, 4 feet 1 inch tall. David, grandson of Medlong, age 1/2, light hair, blue eyes, 2 feet 8 inches tall. That gives you a very visual description of your relative, right? So you're wondering, because we all have family members that are in one family, the shades are just different. Now this happens in my family. I'm sure as it does in yours. My sister, one of my sisters, I have 8 of them, eight living. Yeah, they keep me very busy. But one of them, daughter, when she was born, she was light complexion. She had hazel eyes and blonde hair. So we were like, sister girl. You know how we go, don't you? You know where our mind went, don't you? But now I had to tell them, look, that's the way genealogy works. Those genes may lay dormant for a while, but they come back up. So as she got older, her hair is now brown, but her eyes are still hazel, and she's more of a medium brown, unlike when she was born. She was more like some of the family members now. But her facial structure and everything matches everyone else's. Because genes don't lie. They'll come and go. So whatever you see, that's the way genealogy works. That's the way genes work. You wouldn't think you'd find this in a deed record, would you? Okay? Yes, please. So here we have another one. Okay, this is a continuation from that. In that deed record, it says James Allen, a white man of lawful age, resided in the Chickasaw Nation. That gives me a location. On this oath declared about 1793, John Turnbull of Mobile, Alabama, I got me another location here, sold his mulatto servant woman, Medlong, to William Cooper. John Turnbull said William paid him for said woman nearly, if not all, of the money Cooper had made for his service. So there's another part to the story. John Turnbull was upset with William Cooper because he thought that William Cooper, when he bought Medlong, that she would be a slave and use that statue. However, she became his wife, in essence, and which explains the complexion of all those children. So John Turnbull got upset because he said now that he bought her on the false pretense, and he wants her back and all her increases. So if he bought her on the false pretense, I want her back and all the children, because he did not use her as a servant. Of course, he got thrown out of court because that was his property, and you just said you had a testimony that you paid for him. So how you gonna get your money back? Yeah, I tell you, genealogy is so fascinating. I mean, you think TV is fascinating? Keep on doing genealogy. Yes. So here's another handwritten set of an enslaved person, and this one is dated the 15th of October, 1844. And you'll see it says, paid a man slave 24, what's it? $35. Okay, $35. Okay. But you see here, he gives his name, and so every deed record is going to be different. You're not going to get all those deed records just like we found just then. They give you that big description. So we're just lucky we find them when they actually say who their names are. Is it this button right here? Okay. I'm just going to work you there, Brenda. I'm not doing something right. You know what? I was hicking up here. No, this is just another deed, and this one's dated January 1834. And again, it's the selling of slaves as property in the deed records. You come rescue me. I'm just tearing this machine up on it. Okay, just go to the next one.
This one?
Yeah, keep going back. Keep going up.
Forward?
Yeah, forward.
Okay. One more?
Yeah,
That good?
one more.
Okay.
Okay, let's stop. Let's leave it there. Okay. So we talk about all the type of records you're going to find in the deed records. In index, when you get to actual deed record for the county you're looking for, it may say sale of land. It may say sale of chattel. And we know that's used an animal, right? But sometimes when you go, you say a deed of it says chattel, that's actually an enslaved person. And you don't know till you actually pull the record up and look at it. Sometimes it's going to say sale of a slave, but sometimes it will say it's chattel. It all depends on who's writing the record and how they put it down. And you don't know, because I'm looking for William Smith selling a slave, but it's listed as chattel, and I didn't look at that record because I'm like, well, those are animals. That's when I said, you have to take a lot when you're doing genealogy. You can't be emotional about it. You have to look at every point you can find, right? So like I said, you may find a record asking detailed description of the slave. It may just say, I William Smith sell my slave John to William Johnson. It may tell you his age. Some of them won't tell you his age. I've seen some that gave such a physical description that said that he has a scar on the right side. And when I kept looking for the record, I finally found another record, and it mentioned the same man, and it mentioned that scar. So that reinforced I'm still looking for the same person. I'm on the right track. All the little details of what you're going to need to keep in mind. So when you see a record, don't just write down what's important that you think is important. Highlight all those little bits. That he had a limp, that he had a scar, that he was light complexion, that he was dark complexion. So when you find the next record, if they mention this, then you know that you're not going down the rabbit hole. You see it for the same person, because sometimes the same surnames and first names are the same. How many John Jones can you find? Right? So you don't have anything to distinguish this John Jones from that one. You may find 12 John Jones. In my family, they like the name John. Because on my father's side, they were not very well educated. But John is in the Bible, right? So we all talk about John the Baptist. So that's my father's name is John Ross. His brother's name is John Ernest. His father's name is Eulin John. His father's name is John Calhoun. The great grandfather's name is John. Then I found John in Mobile, Alabama, because the family always said, we from Alabama. Well, some say we're from Alabama. Then others say, no, we've been in Mississippi forever. My forever and your forever are different, right? And talk about the time when they say, well, the name changed. So I'm looking for some relatives, and I was like, in the back of my mind, I'm remembering someone saying, that's not their real name. So, but I didn't know which side of the family they were talking about. So I found my relatives in 1880, and I couldn't find them in 1870. I was like, what? It's a whole house full of children. They got to be somewhere. So I did a census search, ancestry search in 1870, and I just used a surname. His name was Shadrach. Yes, his name was Shadrach. And he had a son that was 11 years old named Shadrach Jr. But guess what? In 1870, now their name was Sanders. In 1870, in Alabama, I found this whole family, and Shadrach Jr. is 1 year old. But their last name now what? Is Phillips. So when they came from Alabama between 1870 and 1880, they changed their last name. So then I started looking at more records, and I started seeing people naming their children, their married children, Philip. They linking those ancestral ties together, aren't they? Because they don't want their name to die away. So they're not going to use it as a surname anymore, but they're using it as a first name. It's like, well, my great-grandmother said that's not their real name, and people just say, well, you know, she always says something. You need to listen to those ancestors. When our older relatives, they know information that's not written down. So it's always a good idea to interview them and just let them talk. I know you heard the story 100 times, but there's something different each time they tell that story. Record it. If they let you record it. There's something a little different, because no one ever tells a story the same way every time, right? That's going to be a little bit different. They're going to take something out, they're going to add a little bit in it. So add all the recordings up and then see what you have. So that's where I found some of my relatives in Alabama, because I didn't know that was a different last name. But I just remember when I was like 9 years old, my great-grandmother was like 112. And she would tell us all these stories. And somehow I've always been the history person in the family. And I remember her saying, that's not their name. So when I asked my relatives on my dad's side, they didn't know what I was talking about. Well, you know, Grandma Nora always was telling those stories. Well, Grandma Nora knew what she was talking about. And sure enough, I found her. And I was just so relieved. So you can't always just go by where this is what the actual record says. Those ancestors knew some history that's not in the book. They're not in the Bible. Because a lot of times they didn't have those. They didn't have a Bible. And sometimes you get a Bible and you'll see the same handwriting on every page. That's cause for alarm to me. Because the same person not going to keep writing it and looks like it's written at the same time. That means someone got a Bible and filled it in with information that they knew. When you find one of different ink and different penmanship, then you might say, you know, I got something here. So look at those family Bible records. And our next workshop is going to be September the 9th. And we're going to talk about state records.
And the link is up on our NBH calendar for y'all to register. So.
Okay. So we're going to talk about how to use state records. So what are the state records we're going to talk about? We'll talk about those marriage records. Because when the marriage records first were in the county, they didn't give a lot of information. But once they came over to the State Department of Health, they started asking more questions. And from 1925 on up, they started asking who were the parents. Now those early 1879, they didn't ask that question. As the years go on, they ask more and more questions, just like a census record does. They ask more and more questions, right? So this is the same thing. So we're going to talk about eligible children records. And that's just a list of children of school age. But some of those records will give you the name of one of the parents. And they give you, and so every county is going to be different with what years they're going to have. So we may have some eligible children records from 1875, and you may have some eligible children records up to 1961. And every record is contingent on how well the person doing the record, recording the record, understood what the assignment was. Case in point. My mother and father and my older sister on the 1962 eligible children school records. None of those are eligible children. Eligible children mean you're of school age to go to school. Not necessarily that you went, but you're of school age. Then my mother's like 19. My dad is 8. Mama's 19. My dad is 18, and my sister's 2. Are those school age people? Because they married. But the person doing the actual taking down the records, they didn't understand what they were supposed to do. So they wrote everyone's name they saw, their ages and everything. And it was misfortunate for them that they didn't follow directions, but it's fortunate for me they didn't follow directions, right? Because now I got another link to my family because someone failed to follow directions. They didn't understand what the assignment was. And you may find records in, some of the records in the county, they are listed by race, and some are not. I may go to Calhoun County and find, okay, this is the black listing of the eligible children records, and this is the white listing of the eligible children records. And the next year, it may be all just Vardaman, and then you have black, white, black, white, black, white, black, white. You don't know until you actually look at the record. Every county is going to should have followed the same directions, but you don't know until you actually look at that record. And sometimes you're going to find the record in the county courthouse. You're going to find it here. You can find it here on our online records, our digital records. If you go to our digital records, you will see eligible children. If you don't find it there, that doesn't mean that we don't have it. It just means it may be on microfilm. Now, the records on microfilm, they're not part of the digital archives. So if you don't see it one way, keep searching. We're going to talk about the state census records, because those records are done by the state. In 1880, you have your federal census records, you have your state census record, and you have your 1880 eligible children records. There were 3 different sets of records that we can find our relatives in, that we can search for. Okay? So the state records are totally different than what you're going to find in the county. Sometimes. And sometimes we may have a municipal record, but they're kind of harder to find. Because we had a municipal archive at one point, and I'm not sure whatever happened to that municipal archive. We had one here in Jackson, but I have no idea what happened to those records or where it went to. At one time, it was in a location at the Margaret Walker Archives across on Robinson Street. No one ever talks about it anymore, so I'm not sure if they're there anymore or what. I need to find out. So we have school records, we have census records, we have birth records, we have death records. Those are state records. They were kept by the state. We have death records here at the Department of Archives and History from 1912 to 1943. In a record after that date, we have to go to the vital records to get. The state of Mississippi did not keep any official, notice I said the word, official birth or death records prior to November 1912. And I said that word official because in some counties, they did keep some form of record in some county. You don't know till you actually go to the county and start looking for those records. We have some cases, we have some midwife records. Not all midwife records were turned in. And so you start going to the actual state and looking the state records or the county records, you're not going to know. So I'm just saying all this to say that when you go in the search room and you go to that, click on that county record link, and then you click on your county, and it may say it's state records. And you click on the state records, it's going to give you what we have here on microfilm. And then if you go on the other side on that same sheet, when you go back to the catalog, it'll say county records. Is it prior to after 1920, Joe? I think it's after 1920. They did a survey that went to the courthouse, see what other county records they had. So if it says county records, look in the county records. Sometimes you see county court cases. Now those are some good records right there. You go to the county court case, you never realize that your relatives were part of a lawsuit. And I found some good ones. Matter of fact, I found a record in the Supreme Court that involved my mother, my grandmother, a couple other relatives, and they were giving testimony. And my grandmother deceased, and I could almost hear her talking when she was giving this record. And my mother said, well, I didn't know they had a record of that. So I copied it and I showed it to her, and she said, yeah, that's what she said, all right. You know. It was just heartwarming to see her respond to that record like that. So go to the court records. There are county court cases, there are Supreme Court cases. When you go to the index online, don't stop until you look through everything. If you have any questions, you can contact the reference staff. There's always someone at the reference desk. Believe me, if they look like they're working, they're just waiting for you to come ask them a question. They have to do something to keep them busy until you come over there and start asking questions. Now, unfortunately, people like me, we follow you in the room. Oh, let me show you this right here. Ask a question. Don't spend your time just being there. That reference is there for a reason. Then you can go online and ask to go to our. You can say research request online also. It doesn't cost anything, but I think they will only search up to an hour. But all the guidelines are on our website. In other words, there's no reason for you not to use the sources here. This is a state agency, and we're here to service the public. So if you have questions, please ask. If you have questions for me, let me give you my email address, because it's not up there. It is Dixon, JDIXON, at mdah.ms.gov. I can't promise you I know all the answers, but I will try to point you in the right direction. No one has all the answers, but I will try to point you to someone who can answer that question. The thing is to keep asking questions. The biggest part of genealogy is having the audacity to ask the tough questions. And sometimes these tough questions will maybe get you thrown out of the family, but hey, sooner or later they're going to be glad you asked that question, because later on down the line, their children won't know the answer to those questions too. So anyone having a question they want to ask before we dismiss for today and meet back here at the same time on September the 9th at 10 o'clock?
I had one question.
Okay.
When you were showing us how to research property on the NDA site, once you get to the website, do you just Google, how do you get to
When you go to our website, you're going to click on catalog.
click on catalog?
Then when you get the catalog, you're going to see that page that I showed you there.
Okay.
Okay. Then you click on county records on microfilm. Now, you can't see the actual records on microfilm. You can just see what we have. But you can submit a request and say, hey, can someone check the Hinds County deed records for this person? Okay. And I think he should have been in Mississippi around this date. Don't just give a name, because they can only search 1 hour. So give them a time frame to work in, because you want to maximize that 1 hour with the research time. Okay, whatever kind it is, be sure you narrow it down. You send a request, and this is one thing I tell everyone, and even those who email me, don't send me a narrative. I need to know what your question is. If I only have 1 hour, I'm going to spend my hour trying to read your narrative, right? So if I spend 30 minutes reading your narrative, that means I only got 30 minutes to answer that question. I want to find Joyce Lawson on the 1850 census. If she should have been this age, I need to know who her parents are. John Smith died around 1935 and 1943. He lives in this county. I need a death record. Because we can't do a genealogy search for you. We can answer questions for you to further along your genealogy search. Okay? So don't send a narrative. I know some people say, send us everything you know. Don't do that. We don't need to know everything you know. We need to know what you need to know. What is your question? Yes.
Well, one thing I've run into researching African American genealogy is that sometimes not all the county records will be on microfilm here. Lauderdale County is really bad about it. They don't, anything after about 1892 or 1894 is not on microfilm. And up in Canton, I ran into one of the things you were talking about is an estate book for Madison County for about 1860 and earlier, and it's not on microfilm. Everything else in Madison County is, but not that. The department did a survey of the courthouses, and not everything was microfilm.
The early records were microfilmed by the Latter-day Saints. And some records didn't get microfilmed because they were not in the proper location. And some records have been added back to the location since then. So if you don't see something here, call the courthouse and ask them, do they have this record? Sometimes the courthouse staff is very limited. So that means you may need to drive to that courthouse or find someone in one of the local historical societies and ask, is anyone available to go to the courthouse and look this record up for me? A lot of times you see people just raring to do some genealogy. So if it's not here, check the courthouse. If you can't go to the courthouse yourself, call them. If they can't help, check one of the local historical societies and see if someone there will go to the courthouse for you. And that was the second part. What was the first part of the question you asked me? About Lauderdale County?
Oh, well, I was just mentioning that as an example of the county where a lot of the county records are not on microfilm.
Right. Now, Lauderdale County is one, and I want to say that Lauderdale County is one of those counties that have their own archives.
Yeah.
So a lot of times you're not going to find a record here because they want you to come to the Lauderdale County archives and just do a search yourself. And they have someone there to actually help you there, or call them, see how's the best place to do it. Do I need to come to the archives there, or is there someone there to help me online? So you're not going to find everything at the archives. Sometimes I have known people, because not every courthouse is very restrictive. There's a book of marriage records missing from the Yalobusha County Courthouse, Book A. I went to a genealogy workshop, had been maybe 1993. And this lady went there, and she was from Grenada. And Grenada is right next to Yalobusha. Yalobusha is the oldest county, but yet Grenada formed in 1870. But she said that she knows a lady who has Book A of the marriage records. She has the actual physical book. And she doesn't want to, she won't return it because there's some marriage records in there she doesn't want anyone to know about. But however, what she didn't know was that marriage index was, I think it was vital records they went through, because we have marriage records here. They also have marriage sound dates. It's marriages prior to 1926. On that roll of microfilm, Book A is indexed. Now you may find that may be your only record. You may not find a marriage record, but in the index is there. So I forgot to tell you, that's another source you can use. Is marriages prior to 1926. You have a black index and you have a white index. Now, if you look at it, you just notice that there are lots more marriages in the black index. Okay? Because in the black index, there are a lot of white marriages. So on the side, in a little square, it'll say white. So you'll know that this is not an African American marriage record. I don't know how the mix-up came, but I just want you to be aware of that. I have not found that in the white index, but in the black index, there are a lot of white marriage records. And if you find the actual record, it will tell you what book and date to go to in the county. Saves you a lot of time. A lot of people don't use it because they don't know about it. But here at the Archives of History, there is a thing called the Marriage Sound Index. Check it first. It's on Sound Index. Everyone's familiar with what the Sound Index means, right?
What is it again?
The Marriage Sound Index. We know what the Sound Index is? Okay. I'm going over my time, but I'm just giving it just a minute here. The Marriage Sound Index is an indexing system where names are indexed how they sound rather than how they're spelled. Also, so case in point, I married a Dixon the first time. I married again after that. But I married a Dixon, and our name was spelled Dixon. Now, my mother-in-law spells her name Dixon. My father-in-law spelled his name Dixson. But I was getting mail for Dickson. On the Sound Index, all those names have the same consonants in a row. That means they have the same code. They're code 250. And so it doesn't matter if it's a DIXON or DIXSON or DICKSON. It's all in the same book. And once you get your syntax code, the records in alphabetical order by the groom's first name. So if I'm looking for Robert Dixon, I'm going to get on the marriage syntax. I'm going to go to D250. I'm going to go right to Robert. And I don't see Robert, I'm going to go to Bob. Because that's what they call Robert, right? They call him Bob. If I don't see Bob, I'm going to go to his initial. Then I'm going to look for my bride, to look for the right bride. Then if I find it, it's going to tell me what county they were in, they got married, what marriage book, what page number. It's an overlooked record that we don't use a lot anymore because we're so used to these search engines. But use that marriage syntax. Come here, or write someone and say, hey, check that marriage syntax, and you find out a lot of times, a lot of these grooms are married 3 or 4 times. And that's what I found out. One man was married 5 times within 10 years. I don't know what that says about him or about her, but it was the same man. And when I asked the relatives, they say, but we didn't never know he was married to her. We just thought they didn't live together. They were actually married. He was married 5 times. And all the marriage records were listed on the marriage syntax. Because I'm like, okay, this is in the right county, but which one is the right one? So when I started asking relatives, they say, oh, all those, we thought those were his girlfriends. No, those his wives. So use that marriage syntax. Any other questions?
Is it spelled M-E-R-R? How's it spelled?
The marriage syntax? It's marriage syntax.
Marriage.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
It's marriages prior to 1926. Okay, yes, sir.
Yes, I just have a question. What advice do you have to dealing with handwritten records?
Handwritten records.
Yes, sometimes I could use a intense magnifying and still, the writers, the handwriting is pretty and everything, but I still can't.
Right. So when I have a case like that, I'm looking for, sometimes it's just 1 or 2 letters that's throwing me off. So I read through the record and try to find that letter again where I know that's what they meant. Then I apply that to the question at hand. Because sometimes a S can look like a P, and you go back and look at that record, and sometimes a double S will look like a P. Because that's a shortcut. You see Mississippi, you say that M-I, then you look at it got P-I, then the P looks different. Because that first 2 ones, those are S's. It's just a double S. So you find a letter in another part of your document where you know, okay, this is a P or this is an O, and then I apply it to the word I'm trying to transcribe. Yes, sir.
Are we able to pull up all census records with our computers at home?
If you not from the archives website, not here, not online, you're not. But you can go to Family Search, or you can go to Ancestry. Family Search is free. Ancestry is a paid subscription. In that case, you can pull up all the federal census. You may be able to put up all the state census, but I'm not sure if all the state census are online or not. But I think they are, but I can't tell you for sure or not. But you can also write to us. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
So, what I'm saying that do y'all have other websites online that we may have access to that versus like coming to an actual building?
You mean
Yeah, like you said, Family Search and Ancestry. One of them is free, one of them is not. Is there any more websites that you know of that we can?
those are just the 2 I use. There may be others out there, but those are the 2 I use, and I also use the archives website. Right. If you're going to, a lot of records on that digital archives that people don't realize that these records have been digitized. Like the elderly children records, those are digitized, and the ones that are not on microfilm are digitized. And you just click on what county you want, And then it'll tell you what dates we have for that county. Then you click on that date, then you start searching. Is that it, guys? Well, I want to thank you all for coming today. Like I said, a lot of times questions occur after we leave the room. So if you have questions, feel free to email me. And if I can't help you, I will surely refer you to someone who can. If not, okay. And hopefully, thank you all so much for sharing your Saturday morning with me. Now, hopefully, next on the 10th, or on the 9th. On the 9th, that's the second Saturday, because that first Saturday is too close to Labor Day, so we didn't choose that one. So we figured you all be out having fun without us. So we chose the next Saturday. And I wanted to kind of keep it close together so you wouldn't forget what we talked about today, especially those records that kind of straddle the fence.